Cleopatra VII Philopator, the legendary queen of ancient Egypt, is renowned not only for her striking beauty, but also for her remarkable political prowess and cunning tactics. Her story has been recounted time and time again, from ancient chronicles to modern-day movies and beauty brands. However, there is much more to this mysterious and enigmatic woman than what meets the eye. In this video, we will delve into some of the most peculiar and unexpected facts about the infamous evil Queen Cleopatra that you may not have known before. Prepare to be amazed by the astonishing life of one of the most fascinating women in history. The early tumultuous years of Cleopatra. The early years of Cleopatra's life were defined by political intrigue, betrayal, and subjugation. Born in 69 BC to Ptolemy XII, the ruling Ptolemaic pharaoh of Egypt, Cleopatra's fate was already tied to the might of Rome. Even then, the Romans had a significant stake in the region's economy, meaning Egypt was relegated to a client state. In 58 BC, Cleopatra's father was forced to flee Egypt, taking his young daughter with him. Meanwhile, the throne of Egypt was seized by Cleopatra's elder sister, Berenice IV Epiphania. However, Ptolemy XII had powerful allies in Rome who funded an expedition to reclaim the throne. Among them was Mark Antony, who reportedly fell in love with the 14-year-old Cleopatra during the campaign. The expedition was successful, and Ptolemy XII was reinstated on the Egyptian throne. However, the pharaoh was still indebted to Rome, which profoundly impacted his daughter's future. When Ptolemy XII died in 51 BC, Cleopatra was named co-ruler of Egypt alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. However, she also inherited her father's debts to Rome, which would become a crucial factor in her personal and political relationships with the Roman elite, the power struggle with her siblings, and political maneuvering. The power struggle between Cleopatra and her siblings was one of the most intense and intriguing conflicts of ancient times. Despite being the co-ruler of Egypt with her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, Cleopatra faced immediate domestic issues that threatened to destabilize her reign. An unexpected famine had hit Egypt due to low levels of the Nile and the lawlessness of the Gabiniani. The unemployed Gallic and Germanic mercenary forces led by Aulus Gabinius was making matters worse. However, it was the political maneuvering and the power tussle that ultimately proved to be Cleopatra's undoing. She had an independent streak, which caused her to make autonomous decisions without considering the counsel of her court members. This resulted in the ire of the high officials and nobles, who saw Cleopatra's rule threaten their influence over the young pharaoh. In no time, these courtiers sided with Ptolemy XIII, who then became the only recognized ruler of Egypt and ousted Cleopatra from the throne. Cleopatra was forced to flee to Thebes, but as her brother's army closed in, she had to make the daring move to leave the country entirely and gather a force in Syria to invade Egypt. However, even with an army on the way to Alexandria, she was met by Ptolemy XIII's troops, who stopped her in her tracks. Cleopatra's fateful involvement in the Roman Civil War. The story of Cleopatra's power struggle with her siblings is filled with twists and turns, but perhaps none more fateful than the civil war of Rome between Julius Caesar and Pompey. Despite inheriting a massive debt owed to the Roman Republic, Cleopatra still managed to provide aid to the Pompeian forces, who were closely connected to the Ptolemies of Egypt. This move solved only a fraction of the dues owed to Rome, but it would significantly impact Cleopatra's future. In 48 BC, after being defeated by Julius Caesar at the Battle of Pharsalus in Greece, Pompey fled to Egypt seeking refuge due to his family's close relationship with the Ptolemies. However, Ptolemy XIII's advisors hatched a plan to double-cross Pompey to impress Caesar, who had just become more powerful after his victory in Greece. They had Pompey stabbed to death upon his arrival on the Egyptian shores and sent his embalmed head to Caesar as a gift of friendship. But Caesar was not impressed by the cowardly act and marched on to Egypt in a show of grief and magnanimity. He intended to solve the political tussle between Ptolemy XIII and his older sister Cleopatra. Little did he know that his decision would change the course of history and lead to one of the most famous love stories of all time. Cleopatra's risky move, meeting Julius Caesar in exile to secure her throne. The year was 47 BC, and the kingdom of Egypt was in turmoil. Julius Caesar, the great Roman general, had arrived on the Egyptian shores with a small cohort of men and taken control of the royal palace. He declared martial law in Alexandria, forcing the young pharaoh, Ptolemy XIII, and his advisors to flee to Pelusium to set up their court. But this was not the end of the story. Cleopatra, the queen of Egypt, was also in exile during this time. She knew the situation was dire and decided to take matters into her own hands. She set out to meet Caesar personally and persuade him to support her cause. It was a dangerous gamble, but she was willing to take it. And so, she dressed up attractively to entice the Roman general. According to Cassius Dio, or according to Plutarch, she hid in a sack and crossed enemy lines. Either way, she was able to link up successfully with Julius Caesar. But time was running out. Ptolemy XIII, emboldened by the support of his people, marched on Alexandria to demand his city back from the encroaching Romans. The situation was tense, and the stakes were high. Cleopatra failed to stir up a rebellion in Alexandria, while Ptolemy XIII besieged the palace where Caesar and Cleopatra were trapped. The pharaoh was supported by his advisors, remnants of the Egyptian army, and Gabiniani mercenaries. They totaled around 20,000 troops, and the siege lasted for 6 long months. But while the battle was raging outside, political machinations were brewing within the enemy camp. Arsinoe, Cleopatra's half-sister, declared herself the new queen of Egypt in Cleopatra's place. Just when things seemed hopeless, Roman reinforcements arrived just in time to defeat the besieging Ptolemaic forces. In the ensuing chaos, Ptolemy XIII fled the battle but was later drowned in the Nile. Most of his advisors were either killed or executed, while Arsinoe was captured and exiled to the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, although later she was killed by the soldiers of Antony at the behest of Cleopatra. Cleopatra's relationship with Julius Caesar and the birth of Caesarion. When Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt in 47 BC, the Roman general was immediately smitten by Cleopatra. The pair flaunted their alliance and relationship by traveling across the Nile in a massive pleasure barge. This relationship resulted in the birth of their son, Ptolemy Caesar, or Caesarion, in the same year, while Cleopatra was already married to her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV. However, Caesar did not officially commit to Cleopatra's claim that Caesarion was her heir to the throne of Egypt. Cleopatra was officially designated as a friend and ally of Rome, a status that granted her the status of a client ruler. She reciprocated by endowing lavish gifts and meeting with Roman dignitaries. However, their lavish display of power was not appreciated by all, and Roman laws prohibited bigamy from a legal standpoint, given that Caesar was still married to Calpurnia. Unfortunately for the couple, Caesar's dictatorial nature eventually led to his demise. He was assassinated on the famous Ides of March in 44 BC, leaving Cleopatra in Rome with her infant son Caesarion. Despite Caesar already naming his nephew Octavian as his heir and prime beneficiary, Cleopatra stayed in Rome for a month in a bid to have Caesarion recognized as the heir to Caesar. Her plan failed, however, and Octavian's eventual rise to power sowed discord among Caesar's supporters in the years to come. From ruthless ruler to powerful partner in Rome's turmoil. In the tumultuous years following the assassination of Julius Caesar, Cleopatra emerged as a formidable player in the power struggle that engulfed Rome. Her ruthless nature was revealed when she ordered the poisoning of her brother, husband, and co-ruler, Ptolemy XIV, in the same year as Caesar's death. But despite her dark reputation, Cleopatra also knew how to seize an opportunity. She threw her support behind the second triumvirate of Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus, who were fighting against Caesar's assassins. She dispatched troops and ships to aid the triumvirate, even though some of her soldiers were captured by one of the assassins, Cassius. By late 42 BC, the triumvirate had emerged victorious, and Antony had established his power in the eastern half of the Roman Republic. It was then that he summoned Cleopatra to his court at Tarsus, in what some scholars believe was a bid to form a romantic as well as political alliance. Cleopatra was initially hesitant, but eventually made her way to Tarsus to meet Antony. She cleared her name by reaffirming her support for both Caesar and Antony, and even hosted extravagant banquets on barges for Antony and his officers. The atmosphere was charged with both romance and sensuality, as the powerful Roman commander and the alluring Egyptian queen forged an alliance that would shape the course of history. Their partnership was not without its challenges, however. Antony's power struggles with Octavian and his eventual marriage to Octavian's sister Octavia created a rift between the two lovers. Despite these obstacles, their passionate affair became legendary, and Cleopatra even accompanied Antony to Rome, hoping to cement their political alliance. The love story and political fallout of Antony and Cleopatra. As the years passed, Antony's relationship with Cleopatra only grew stronger. In late 41 BC, he visited Egypt at her invitation and was greeted with a lavish reception in Alexandria. It was a stark contrast to Julius Caesar's arrival in the city with his soldiers and martial rule. Cleopatra spared no expense to impress her Roman lover, and the two enjoyed a passionate reunion. The relationship between Antony and Cleopatra only deepened in the following years as they welcomed the birth of twins, a son named Alexander Helios and a daughter named Cleopatra Selene II. Although Antony was already legally married to Fulvia and later to Octavia, his loyalty to Cleopatra never wavered. But Antony's political fortunes began to decline as his relationship with Octavian soured. Octavian, who continued to promote himself as the true heir of Caesar in Rome, viewed Antony's ties to the Greek East of the Roman Republic with suspicion. Antony, often influenced by Cleopatra, flaunted his connections with the Ptolemaic kingdom, granting it various territories in the Levant, Libya, and Crete. Antony's military campaign to Parthia in 33 BC, which was not fully aided by Octavian, proved disastrous for his political standing. And in a bold move to secure his bond with Cleopatra, Antony divorced Octavia in 33 BC, intending to marry the Egyptian queen. The propaganda wars between Octavian and Antony began in earnest in 34 BC. In a bid to discredit Antony, Octavian painted Cleopatra as a wily seductress who had bewitched the Roman commander. He accused Antony of being a slave to his Oriental queen, and even accused Cleopatra of using witchcraft and sorcery to manipulate him. The ultimate showdown between Octavian and Antony. In the year 32 BC, the tension between Octavian and Antony reached a boiling point. Antony's supporters in Rome had to flee for their lives as they were threatened by Octavian's private army. Octavian was determined to consolidate his power and eliminate his rival's influence once and for all. To achieve his goals, Octavian's agents forcefully seized Antony's will from the Temple of Vesta. The will revealed Antony's plans to divide the Roman territories in the east among his sons, but more importantly, it named Caesarion, the alleged son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, as the heir to Caesar's legacy. This was a direct challenge to Octavian's claim as the true heir of Caesar. The Senate, alarmed by the contents of the will, officially revoked Antony's consulship and declared war on Cleopatra's regime in Egypt. This set the stage for the ultimate showdown between Octavian and Antony, culminating in the naval battle of Actium in 31 BC. Antony and Cleopatra's combined fleet was massive, but Octavian's fleet was more agile and composed of professional forces under the command of the experienced Agrippa. The battle was intense, but ultimately Octavian emerged victorious, forcing Antony and Cleopatra to flee to Egypt via Greece. The defeat at Actium was a significant blow to Antony's political ambitions, and Octavian's forces soon besieged him and Cleopatra. In a tragic end to their story, Antony and Cleopatra committed suicide, choosing to die on their own terms rather than be captured by their enemy. The Battle of Actium marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire, with Octavian eventually crowned Emperor Augustus. Antony's will and his decision to name Caesarion as the heir to Caesar's legacy had far-reaching consequences, setting the stage for future power struggles and political upheavals in Rome. The tragic end of Antony and Cleopatra. Love, politics, and betrayal. The love story of Antony and Cleopatra is one for the ages, but after the Battle of Actium, their relationship may have been on the rocks. Antony's political power was in shambles, and Cleopatra seemed more concerned with securing her son Caesarion's reign in Egypt. However, they put their differences aside to face their common enemy, Octavian, who refused to negotiate with Antony. Octavian's forces marched on Egypt from two sides, and despite Antony's attempts to defend Alexandria, he grew despondent and ultimately committed suicide upon hearing false news of Cleopatra's death. Meanwhile, Cleopatra's attempts to negotiate with Octavian were derailed when he seized 3 of her children. Cleopatra, a proud and defiant ruler, refused to be paraded in Octavian's victory march, but news of his plan to deport her to Rome led her to take her own life. The manner of Cleopatra's suicide is shrouded in mystery and drama. Many believe she allowed herself to be bitten by an asp, but other accounts suggest she injected herself with poison or used an ointment. Regardless of how she died, her tragic end marked the end of an era and the beginning of the Roman Empire under Octavian, who would later be crowned Emperor Augustus. Antony and Cleopatra's story may have ended in tragedy, but their legacy continues to capture the imaginations of people around the world. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Remember to subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and share the video.